Chapter 1. A Call in the Night. Rain drummed against the thatched roof with such fury as if the Lord himself had decided to wash away the sins of this world. Isabel looked up from the mortar where she was grinding dried lavender with valerian root and frowned. Night visits rarely promised anything good. The knock on the door came sharp and demanding. The young woman wiped her hands on her apron and picked up a small knife from the table, not for protection, but for her own peace of mind. During 5 years of living in this dilapidated house on the outskirts of the village, Isabel had learned caution. "Who's there?" she called out, not rushing to open the bolt. "Healer!" Panic rang in the voice beyond the door. Isabel recognized Martha, one of the women from the werewolf pack that dwelled in the forests north of the village. "Open up, please! The Alpha is dying!" Isabel slid back the bolt. On the threshold stood a woman soaked to the bone with wild eyes. Water dripped from her dark hair, forming puddles on the wooden floor. "Silver poison," Martha gasped, grabbing Isabel's hand. "Hunters shot him 3 days ago. We removed the arrow, but the fever won't break. He's dying." "I don't treat alphas," Isabel said firmly, freeing her hand. "I deliver babies, treat children and women. You know the rules." "To hell with the rules," Martha wailed. "If he dies, the pack will fall apart. There'll be a war for power, and the children and pregnant women will die first, the very ones you've saved." Isabel froze. The woman was right. Without an alpha, the pack could indeed plunge into chaos. And she knew these women too well, had delivered their children, seen their joy and tears. Would she really let them suffer because of her own stubbornness? "Damn it," Isabel muttered, already pulling on her cloak. "Let me gather herbs." She quickly packed into her leather bag everything that could help with silver poisoning: wormwood, sage, crushed charcoal, belladonna tincture. Her grandmother had once said that silver was death for werewolves, but if the poison hadn't reached the heart, there was a chance. The journey through the forest that night seemed endless. Trees rustled ominously, wind tearing the last leaves from branches. Isabel clutched her bag tightly, trying to keep up with Martha, who ran ahead with inhuman speed. The pack's den was located in caves at the foot of the Gray Mountains. Isabel had been here before, but always during the day, and always she was met with respect. Now, dozens of werewolves crowded at the entrance, men and women with tense faces, children clinging to their mothers. Tension hung in the air, ready to explode at any moment. "Let the healer through!" Martha shouted, and the crowd parted. Isabel was led to the deepest cave. It was hot from numerous torches, and the air carried a sickly, sweet smell of illness and sweat. On a wide bed of furs lay a man, huge, muscular, with long dark hair plastered to his forehead. Even in delirium, he seemed dangerous. This was Cain, Alpha of the Northern Pack. Isabel had seen him only once, briefly, when he came to check on how she was treating one of his women. Then he had seemed stern and arrogant to her. Now his face was twisted with pain, and foam had formed on his lips. "When was he last conscious?" Isabel asked, dropping to her knees beside the bed. "This morning," answered a short man with a gray beard. This was Thorn, the pack's beta. "Since then, only delirium. The wound won't heal." Isabel pulled back the furs and examined the alpha's chest. The wound on the left side of his chest looked truly terrible. The edges had blackened, and the surrounding skin had taken on an unhealthy silvery tint. The poisoning was spreading. "I need silence and space," she commanded. "Everyone except 2 assistants, get out." To her surprise, the werewolves obeyed. Only Thorn and a young woman named Lyra remained. Isabel set to work. First, she cleaned the wound with wormwood decoction, removing the blackened tissue. Cain groaned but didn't regain consciousness. Then she applied a compress of crushed charcoal mixed with sage. This should draw out the remaining silver from his blood. "Hold him tighter," she warned, taking out a vial of belladonna tincture. "This is going to hurt." She poured several drops directly into the wound. The reaction was instantaneous. Cain arched like a bow, a growl tearing from his throat, utterly inhuman. The Alpha's eyes flew open, but they were clouded with fever. Amber, feral, they darted about, focusing on nothing. "Hold him!" Isabel screamed, trying to keep the compress in place. Cain jerked with such force that Thorn was thrown aside. Lyra clung to his shoulders, but the Alpha was too strong even in delirium. His hand shot upward, grabbing Isabel by the wrist. The young woman tried to break free, but his fingers clenched like a vice. And then everything happened too fast. Cain yanked her toward him, his eyes flashing gold, and she saw his fangs lengthening. In the last moment, she understood what was about to happen, but it was too late. Pain pierced her shoulder, sharp, searing. Cain sank his teeth into her, and Isabel felt something hot and foreign flowing into her blood. She screamed, trying to push him away, but strength was leaving her. "No!" Thorn lunged forward, pulling the Alpha away. Lyra caught the falling Isabel. The last thing the healer saw before losing consciousness was Cain's amber eyes, suddenly lucid and filled with horror. Chapter 2. The Mark. Isabel woke to pain. It pierced through her entire body, but her shoulder burned especially fiercely. The young woman tried to move and groaned. Every muscle protested. "Don't move," came a soft female voice. Isabel struggled to open her eyes. Martha leaned over her, her face pale and worried. What happened?" Isabel croaked. Her throat was dry, as if she'd swallowed sand. "You spent 2 days in fever," Martha answered, helping her sit up and bringing a cup of water to her lips. "Drink." The water seemed divine. Isabel drank greedily from the entire cup and only then looked around. She was lying in a small cave, cozily furnished with furs and hand-woven rugs, nothing like an infirmary. "Where am I?" "In the Alpha's chambers." Martha looked away. "He insisted after what happened." Memory returned like an avalanche. The bite, the pain, amber eyes. Isabel clutched convulsively at her shoulder. Under her fingers she felt a bandage, and beneath it, a strange tingling, as if the wound lived a life of its own. "He bit me," she breathed out. "The Alpha bit me. I should be dead. Werewolves don't leave marks on humans. They kill them." "You didn't die," Martha said quietly. "Your magic, it's somehow resisting the poison, but not rejecting it completely. Isabel, you're neither human nor werewolf now. You're between." "What?" Isabel threw off the blanket and jumped to her feet. Dizziness washed over her in a wave, but she stayed upright. "What do you mean, between?" "Your eyes sometimes turn amber," Martha explained, and fear rang in her voice. "You hear better, smell scents more sharply, but you can't shift into a wolf. The Alpha's mark changed you, but your magic won't let the transformation complete." Isabel collapsed back onto the bed. Her hands trembled. No, this can't be." She had lived 5 years in solitude, enjoying the freedom she'd won by fleeing from a forced marriage. 5 years she'd been her own mistress, and now... There's something else. Martha swallowed. An Alpha's bite isn't just a mark. When an Alpha bites in fever, sometimes it's a mate mark, a true mate mark. "No," Isabel shook her head. "No! I can't be anyone's mate. I don't want to be." "Isabel, listen." "No!" The healer jumped up, this time ignoring the dizziness. "There must be a way to break this bond. I'll find it. The cave door opened and Cain entered. Isabel froze. The Alpha looked healthy. The wound on his chest had apparently healed, though he still moved carefully. But what struck her most was his gaze, full of guilt and pain. "Leave us, Martha," he said quietly, not taking his eyes off Isabel. The woman nodded silently and hurried away, leaving them alone. Silence hung heavy and tense. Isabel clenched her fists, feeling anger building inside her. "You destroyed my life," she finally breathed out. I know, Cain answered. His voice was hoarse. And I'm sorry. If I could take it all back. But you can't, Isabel exploded. I was free. Do you understand? For the first time in my life, I was free. And now I don't even know who I am. You're my true mate, Cain said, and his words held a strange mixture of reverence and despair. Even in fever, my wolf recognized you. I didn't want this, didn't plan it, but the bond is established. Then break it! Isabel stepped toward him, her eyes flashing. There must be a way! No. Cain shook his head. A true mate mark is unbreakable. At least, I don't know of a way. But he paused, and the pain on his face intensified. I won't keep you here against your will. What? The pack must think you're my mate, at least for a while. Cain began pacing the cave, clearly uncomfortable. If they learn the truth, that you haven't accepted the bond, that the mark is incomplete, some will see it as weakness. They'll try to challenge me, and you'll be in danger. So I have to pretend? Isabel asked incredulously. Only until we find a solution. Cain stopped and looked into her eyes. I'll give you access to all our records, to the elders. If there's a way to break the bond or complete your transformation, we'll find it. But outwardly, you must be my mate. Isabel wanted to refuse. Every cell of her being protested against this plan, but she was also practical. If the werewolves truly saw her as the alpha's weakness, they might try to kill her, and she needed time to find a way to reclaim her life. Fine, she said through gritted teeth. I'll agree to this game, but with conditions. First, you don't touch me. At all. Second, I get access to all your knowledge about marks and transformations. And third, she straightened, looking at him defiantly. As soon as I find a way to break the bond, I leave, and you don't try to stop me. Cain was silent for a long time. Finally, he nodded. Agreed to everything. Then we have a deal. Isabel extended her hand. Cain looked at her hand, then carefully shook it. At the moment of contact, Isabel felt a strange tingling run across her skin, as if a spark had jumped between them. She jerked her hand back sharply. What was that? The bond. Cain answered quietly. It reacts to touch. It will grow stronger with time. Wonderful, Isabel muttered. Another reason to stay away from you. Cain winced but said nothing. I'll show you your quarters, he finally said. They're next to mine. The pack will expect that we spend time together, but I promise to respect your personal space. Lead on, Isabel said shortly, grabbing her bag of herbs, the only thing remaining from her former life. As they walked through the winding tunnels of the caves, Isabel felt eyes on them. Dozens of gazes followed, curious, hostile, intrigued. Some werewolves bowed their heads in respect to the alpha. Others looked at her with poorly concealed mistrust. Welcome to the cage, Isabel thought grimly. Only this cage isn't made of bars, but of stairs and expectations. And most frightening, part of her, the new feral part, felt a strange satisfaction from Cain's proximity. As if something inside her was drawn to him, recognizing him as hers. Isabel gritted her teeth. She wouldn't let this beast magic control her. She would find a way to break free. Even if she had to turn the entire werewolf world upside down to do it. Chapter 3. The Game. A week had passed since Isabel became an unwilling prisoner of the pack. She couldn't call it anything else, despite the comfortable quarters and respectful treatment. Freedom wasn't measured by the comfort of beds and the taste of food, it was measured by the ability to leave. And Isabel couldn't leave. She spent her days immersed in ancient records. Cain had kept his word and granted her access to the pack's library, a collection of scrolls and books kept in one of the deepest caves. An elder named Rael, a gray-haired werewolf with intelligent eyes, helped her decipher the ancient texts. The true mate mark is rarely mentioned, Rael would say, unrolling another yellowed scroll. It's ancient magic, a rare gift of fate. Most werewolves never meet their true mates. And how can it be broken? Isabel asked for the 100th time. Rael shook his head each time. The texts contain no mention of breaking it. The bond is considered sacred, eternal. Everything can be broken, Isabel stubbornly insisted. Everything has a price. She studied the records until her eyes began to water from the candlelight, and when she returned to her quarters, she would find gifts. A new dress of soft wool, silver jewelry, the irony wasn't lost on her, even books on herbalism. Isabel knew all this came from Cain. He kept his word and didn't intrude on her space, but constantly reminded her of his presence with these tokens of attention. It irritated her more than she was willing to admit. And then there were the public appearances. The pack is gathering for the evening meal, Lyra announced, peeking into Isabel's quarters one evening. The Alpha asks you to join. Asks or demands, Isabel clarified dryly. Lyra smiled sheepishly. With the Alpha, it's often the same thing. Isabel sighed and put on a new dress, dark green, emphasizing her red hair. In a week, she'd learned to play her role. It was like a performance where every gesture had meaning. The great hall where the pack gathered for meals buzzed with voices. Long tables groaned under game, bread, and mead. The werewolves ate heartily, laughed, argued. When Isabel appeared, conversations died down. She walked to the dais where the Alpha's table stood. Cain was already there, and his face softened at the sight of her. Isabel understood this was part of the game. He was portraying a satisfied Alpha greeting his mate. Isabel. He extended his hand, helping her up onto the platform. She took his hand, trying to ignore the now familiar tingling from his touch. They sat side by side, and gradually the noise in the hall resumed. How is your research progressing? Cain asked quietly, pouring her wine. Slowly, she answered just as quietly. Your ancestors were sparse with records about marks. Perhaps because they considered them a blessing, not a curse. Bitterness sounded in his voice. Isabel cast him a quick glance. During this week, she'd noticed that Cain wasn't like the typical tyrannical Alpha she'd imagined him to be. He was strict but fair. He cared for his pack and clearly suffered from the situation no less than she did. This only made everything more difficult. It would be easier to hate him if he were a monster. Alpha. A voice rang out from one of the tables. A man in his 30s with harsh features stood up. Isabel remembered him. Darren, one of the pack's best hunters. I have a question. Cain nodded, giving permission to speak. When will we hold the ceremony of official mate recognition? Darren looked straight at Isabel. The pack has the right to see that our Alpha has found his true mate. Isabel tensed. This was a challenge, cloaked in politeness. In due time, Cain answered calmly. Isabel is still adapting to pack life. A week has passed, Darren insisted. Usually the ceremony is held the day after marking. Why are we waiting? Because I decided so. Cain's voice became harder, and a wave of power ran through the hall, the physical manifestation of the Alpha's authority. But Darren didn't back down. With respect, Alpha, but the pack is beginning to doubt. Is the mark truly established, or has the healer rejected the bond? The hall plunged into deathly silence. All eyes were riveted to the Alpha's table. Isabel felt anger rising inside her. This smug bastard was challenging not only Cain, but her as well. She'd lived 5 years as an independent woman, fought for her right to freedom. No werewolf would make her feel inadequate. Before Cain could respond, Isabel stood. She leaned her hands on the table and looked straight at Darren, allowing the feral part of her nature to show. Her eyes flashed amber. You doubt the mark? Her voice sounded strange, with a slight growl. Want to verify it personally? Darren jerked, clearly not expecting such a reaction. I didn't mean to insult. But you did, Isabel cut him off. Both the Alpha and me. I agreed to become part of this pack, though I could have left at any moment. A lie, but no one except Cain knew that. I stayed because I acknowledged the bond. But if anyone here thinks I'm unworthy to be the Alpha's mate, let them say it directly. Now. She swept her gaze around the hall. No one uttered a word. Even Darren lowered his eyes. That's what I thought. Isabel sat back down, her heart pounding. May we continue the meal? Cain looked at her with poorly concealed astonishment and admiration. He raised his cup. To my mate, he proclaimed, sharp-tongued and fearless. To the Alpha's mate, the pack echoed, and Isabel felt even more trapped. Later, as they returned to their quarters, Cain walked beside her in silence. Only at her door did he speak. You were magnificent today. Don't flatter me, Isabel responded wearily. I simply defended myself. And me, he added quietly. You stood up for me, even though you hate this situation. Isabel looked at him. In the torchlight, his face seemed softer, younger. I gave my word to pretend. I always keep my word. I know. Cain extended his hand as if to touch her cheek, but stopped. Good night, Isabel. Good night, she answered and disappeared behind the door. Only when alone did she allow herself to slide down the wall and clutch her head in her hands. This was becoming too real. She played the role of the Alpha's mate so well that sometimes she began to believe it herself. And even worse was that Cain, she liked him. Despite everything, she was beginning to see in him not a jailer, but a person. A worthy, noble man who suffered from the situation no less than she did. No, Isabel told herself sternly. You can't allow yourself to become attached. You'll find a way to break the bond and reclaim your freedom. That's the only thing that matters. But somehow, on this night, the thought of freedom brought her no familiar comfort. Chapter 4. Secret Searches. Another 2 weeks had passed. Isabel immersed herself in studying ancient manuscripts with maniacal persistence. Every morning she woke with one thought: today she would find the answer. And every evening she fell asleep disappointed. But she didn't give up, couldn't. You spend too much time in the library, Lyra noted, bringing her lunch on yet another day. Even Rael says you've studied more texts than he has in his entire life. Then I need to study even more, Isabel replied without looking up from the scroll. Lyra sighed and set the tray on the table. The Alpha is worried about you. The Alpha doesn't need to worry, Isabel snapped, but immediately softened. Sorry, I'm just tired. I can see that, Lyra sat down beside her. Isabel, may I ask you a question? A personal one? Isabel finally looked up from the scroll and regarded the young woman. Over these weeks, Lyra had become something like a friend, the only person in the pack with whom Isabel could speak openly. Almost openly. Ask. Why do you so desperately want to break the bond? There was no judgment in Lyra's voice, only genuine interest. Cain is a good Alpha. He's caring, strong, fair. Many women would dream of being in your place. Isabel leaned back in her chair and rubbed her tired eyes. Do you know why I ran away from home 5 years ago? You mentioned something about an unwanted marriage. I was 18, Isabel began, and old pain sounded in her voice. My father decided to marry me off to the son of a wealthy merchant. A man twice my age who looked at me like a thing he'd bought. They didn't ask what I wanted. My opinion didn't matter. I was just goods for trade. That's terrible, Lyra whispered. The night before the wedding, I ran away. I took only my grandmother's herbs and a few coins. I found this house on the outskirts of the village, and the elder offered me a deal. I treat the villagers for free. He gives me shelter. Isabel smiled, but the smile was sad. For the first time in my life, I was free. For the first time, my decisions belonged only to me. Do you understand? I didn't belong to anyone. I was my own mistress. And now you feel you've lost that freedom again. Lyra understood. Yes, Isabel nodded. It doesn't matter how good Cain is. It doesn't matter that he promises not to keep me. The very fact of this bond, it makes me dependent. I feel it constantly, like a chain around my neck. And every day it grows stronger. Lyra was silent for a long time, considering her words. You know what's strangest? She finally said. The Alpha told me almost the same thing. What? Isabel turned sharply to her. A couple of days ago, he said he feels like your jailer, that the bond that should have been a blessing has become a curse for both of you. Lyra stood. Maybe you're not as different as you think. She left, leaving Isabel alone with her thoughts. That night, Isabel couldn't sleep. Lyra's words spun in her head, giving her no peace. She rose from bed and, throwing on a shawl, left her quarters. The pack's caves at night were quiet, lit by sparse torches. Isabel walked, not knowing where, letting her feet lead her, and found herself at the entrance to Cain's quarters. She was about to turn and leave when she heard voices from inside. One belonged to Cain, the other to Thorn. "You can't continue like this," the beta was saying. "The pack sees that you're avoiding her. People are beginning to doubt." "I'm not avoiding her," Cain replied wearily. "I'm just giving her space. She made it clear she doesn't want my presence." "But you're her true mate. The bond should draw you together, not push you apart." "The bond only works one way, Thorn." Pain sounded in Cain's voice, so sharp that Isabel flinched. "My wolf recognized her, accepted her, but she sees only a jailer in me. And I don't blame her. I truly stole her freedom." "You saved her life. If not for the mark, the transformation poison would have killed her. And now she's stuck between two worlds, belonging to neither." Isabel heard the sound of footsteps. Cain was pacing the room. "She's searching for a way to break the bond. You think I don't know?" "She carefully studies every text, every mention of marks. And you know what's worst? I'm helping her. Giving her access to all the knowledge that might help her leave me." "You've lost your mind," Thorn growled. "She's your mate. You should fight for her." "No," Cain said firmly. "I must respect her choice. She didn't ask for this bond. She didn't ask for me. And if she finds a way to free herself, I'll let her go." A long pause hung in the air. "Even if it kills you?" Thorn asked quietly. "Because breaking the bond with a true mate is exactly what it does. You know the legends." "I know." Cain's voice became even quieter. "But her freedom is more important than my life." Isabel recoiled from the door, her heart pounding wildly. She turned and nearly ran back to her quarters, Cain's words echoing in her head. "Her freedom is more important than my life." She reached her room and closed the door, leaning against it. Her hands trembled. What had she done? She'd been so focused on her own pain, her own lost freedom, that she hadn't thought about what Cain was feeling. He hadn't wanted this bond any more than she had. He suffered from it no less. And yet he was willing to die to give her freedom. Isabel ran her hands over her face. Everything had become so tangled. When had this happened? When had her righteous anger mixed with guilt? When had hatred of the situation begun to transform into something else toward Cain himself? She approached the window, a narrow slit in the rock through which the night forest was visible. The moon hung full and bright above the treetops. "What should I do?" she asked the night, but no answer came. The next day began with a surprise. Isabel headed to the library as usual, but found an unfamiliar woman there. Tall, with gray hair braided in an intricate plait, she radiated power and ancient wisdom. "You must be Isabel," the woman said, turning around. Her eyes were a strange silvery color. "I am Marana, seer of the Eastern Pack. Cain sent a messenger for me." "Seer," Isabel echoed. "Those who see what is hidden from others," Marana explained. "I've heard of your unusual situation, and perhaps I can help." Isabel felt hope flare inside her. "Do you know how to break the bond?" Marana slowly shook her head. "No, but I know how to complete it." "Complete?" Isabel frowned. "I don't want to complete the bond, I want to break it." "Child," Marana came closer, and Isabel felt ancient power emanating from her. "You are currently suspended between two worlds. This unnatural state cannot last forever. Sooner or later, your magic won't hold, and you'll either complete the transformation or die." The words fell into the library's silence like stones into water. "How much time do I have?" Isabel croaked. "A month, maybe 2. Marana placed her hand on Isabel's shoulder. "But there is a way to complete the transformation safely. The full moon ritual. If you accept the bond fully, Allow it to complete. You will become a werewolf. You will survive. And if I don't accept the bond? Marana didn't answer, but her silence was more eloquent than any words. Isabel stepped back, her world crumbling. So I have no choice? I must either bind myself to Cain forever or die? There is always a choice, Marana said gently. But sometimes all options are painful. The seer headed for the exit, but stopped at the door. You know what I see when I look at you and Cain? Two broken souls who could heal each other, if only they would stop fighting fate. Think about it. She left, leaving Isabel in the library's deafening silence. The young woman sank into a chair, clutching her head in her hands. A month. She had only a month to make a decision that would determine the rest of her life. Freedom or life. And somehow, this choice no longer seemed as simple as before. Chapter 5. Cracks in the Wall. The following days, Isabel spent in a strange daze. She attended meals, played the role of the alpha's mate, but her thoughts were far away. A month. She had only a month left. Cain noticed the change. She could see it in his worried glances, in the way he lingered nearby longer than usual, clearly wanting to ask what had happened. But he kept his word, didn't intrude on her space, didn't pressure her. This made everything even worse. You spoke with Marana, he said one evening as they returned from yet another meal. It was a statement, not a question. Yes, Isabel answered shortly. And what did she say? Isabel stopped, looking at him in the torchlight. His face showed such hope and fear simultaneously that her heart clenched. She said, I have a choice, Isabel said slowly. Complete the transformation, or die. Breaking the bond is impossible. She saw something flicker across his face. Pain, relief, guilt. So you know, he said quietly. Know what? That if you don't complete the transformation, you'll die. Cain turned away, clenching his fists. I've known this from the beginning. Marana confirmed what I already suspected. That's why I gave you access to all the records, all the knowledge. I hoped that you'd come to this conclusion yourself, that you'd make the choice not because I forced you, but because you wanted to live. You liar, Isabel breathed out, anger sounding in her voice. You said you'd help me find a way to break the bond. I said I'd give you access to all knowledge. Cain turned to face her and gold flared in his eyes. And I kept my word. It's not my fault that such a method doesn't exist. But you knew. You knew from the very beginning that I wouldn't be able to leave. Yes, I knew, Cain shouted, and his voice echoed through the stone corridors. I knew, and you know what I felt? Relief. Because the thought that you might leave, that you might die, tore me apart. Yes, I'm a selfish bastard who was glad you were stuck with me. Are you satisfied? Isabel recoiled, not from his words, but from the pure, raw pain in his voice. Cain. No, he raised his hand, stopping her. Let me finish. I didn't want this bond, didn't plan it, but when it formed, when my wolf recognized you, he ran his hand through his hair, clearly fighting for control. It's as if a part of me I didn't know existed, that I didn't know I was missing. You have no right to make me feel guilty for wanting freedom. Isabel interrupted him, tears in her eyes. I know. Cain took a step back and weariness appeared on his face. And I'm not asking you to feel guilty, I'm asking you to live. Even if it means living with me, even if you hate me every day for the rest of our lives. Just live. He turned and walked away, leaving Isabel standing in the corridor with a storm of emotions inside. That night, Isabel didn't sleep. She lay staring at the stone ceiling, and for the first time in all these weeks, she allowed herself to honestly admit what she felt. She no longer hated Cain, perhaps she never truly had. She hated the situation, hated the loss of control, hated that her choice had been stolen. But Cain himself? He was a good man, a fair leader, a caring alpha. She'd seen how he interacted with pack members, with strictness, but also with warmth. She'd seen how he played with children, how he comforted weeping mothers, how he resolved disputes with wisdom. And she'd seen how he looked at her, with hope, pain, desire, and respect all at once. When did I start seeing not a jailer in him, but a person? Isabel asked herself. Maybe it was when he brought her books on herbalism, remembering her passion. Or when he stood up for her before the pack, demanding nothing in return. Or when she overheard his conversation with Thorn, when he said her freedom was more important than his life. Isabel sat up in bed, hugging her knees. The truth was that the bond was working. Despite her resistance, despite her fear, something inside her was drawn to Cain. And with each day, this pull grew stronger. She was afraid of it. Afraid of losing herself in this bond, of becoming simply the alpha's mate and not Isabel, healer, herbalist, free woman. But had Cain ever tried to change her? He gave her space, respected her boundaries, supported her research. He didn't demand she be someone she wasn't. Maybe, Isabel thought, freedom isn't just the right to leave, maybe it's also the right to stay. By one's own choice. This thought was frightening and liberating at the same time. The next morning, Isabel made her decision. She dressed carefully, choosing one of the beautiful dresses Cain had given her, deep blue, emphasizing her figure. She left her hair down, letting red curls fall freely on her shoulders. She headed to Cain's quarters. At the door, she was met by Thorn, who raised his eyebrows in surprise.
Isabel? The Alpha.
I need to speak with him, she said firmly. It's important. Thorn studied her face for several moments, then nodded and stepped aside.
He's inside.
Isabel entered the Alpha's quarters for the first time since waking there after the bite. The room was spacious, furnished with austere elegance, furs on the floor, weapons on the walls, a large bed in the corner. And Cain, standing at the window, gazing at the forest. He turned at the sound of her footsteps, and surprise showed on his face.
Isabel? Did something happen?
Yes. She came closer, her heart beating wildly. Something happened. I want to talk. Really talk. Not playing a role, not pretending, honestly. Cain nodded, tension in his shoulders easing slightly.
I'm listening.
Isabel took a deep breath. I fought for freedom my whole life. I ran from a marriage they forced on me, built a life that belonged only to me. And when what happened, I felt like I'd lost control again, became a prisoner again. She paused, choosing her words. But over these weeks, I realized something. You never tried to make me a prisoner. I built the prison myself, from my own fear.
Isabel.
Let me finish, she stopped him. I was afraid of the bond, because I thought it would take away my identity, that I had become simply your mate, losing myself. But you never demanded that. You gave me space, respected my boundaries, supported my interests. You saw a person in me, not just a mate. Cain looked at her with such an expression, as if afraid to breathe lest he shatter the moment. And I realized, Isabel continued, coming even closer, that freedom isn't just the right to leave. It's also the right to choose where to stay. And with whom. What are you saying? Cain's voice was hoarse. I'm saying, Isabel stood directly in front of him, looking into his amber eyes. That I want to try. I want to give us a chance, not because I have no choice, but because I choose this, choose you. For several moments, Cain simply looked at her, as if not believing what he'd heard. Then, very slowly, he reached out and touched her cheek. Are you sure? He whispered. Because if you do this, if you accept the bond fully, there will be no going back. I know. Isabel covered his hand with hers. The spark from the touch ran between them, but this time she didn't pull away. And I'm sure. Cain pulled her to him, embracing her with such tenderness, as if she were made of glass. Isabel embraced him in return, and for the first time since the bite, she felt that the bond between them wasn't a chain, but a bridge, a path to each other. I promise, Cain whispered into her hair, that you'll never regret this choice. I'll spend every day proving that you deserve love that doesn't confine, but liberates. Isabel raised her head, looking at him. And I promise to give us a real chance, without fear, without resistance, with an open heart. Cain leaned down, and their lips met in a kiss, tender, careful, full of promises. And as they kissed, Isabel felt something inside her finally fall into place. The bond between them shone brighter, stronger, fuller. And for the first time, this didn't frighten her. It felt like coming home. Chapter 6. The Full Moon Ritual. News that Isabel had accepted the bond spread through the pack with the speed of a wildfire. By evening, the entire pack knew that Isabel had finally acknowledged the mark and that the full moon ceremony would take place in 3 days. Isabel hadn't expected such excitement. The pack's women set about preparing her for the ceremony with enthusiasm that bordered on obsession. It must be perfect, Martha insisted, sorting through fabrics for the ceremonial dress. The last time the pack witnessed the full moon ritual was 20 years ago, when Cain's parents accepted their bond. I didn't think this would be such a big event, Isabel admitted as Lyra braided her hair, trying different styles. Are you joking? Lyra laughed. The alpha's true mate is a blessing for the entire pack. It means strong offspring, stability, prosperity. Of course, it's a big event. Isabel was nervous. The last few days with Cain had been strange, good but strange. They spent more time together, talked, got to know each other. He told her about his childhood, about how he became alpha after his father's death. She shared stories about her grandmother, about herbs, about the years of solitude. And something new was growing between them, not just the pull of the bond, but genuine closeness. Understanding. A budding attachment that frightened Isabel with its intensity. But Cain still kept his physical distance. He didn't enter her quarters, didn't try to force intimacy. He waited for the ceremony, when the bond would be properly completed. Tell me about the ritual, Isabel requested as the women bustled around her. What exactly will happen? Martha and Lyra exchanged glances. The ritual takes place under the full moon, Martha began. It's an ancient ceremony dating back to the first werewolves. You and Cain will stand in the center of a circle formed by the pack. Marana will conduct the blessing rite. And then, Lyra continued, blushing slightly, you must complete the bond. Physically. And when the bond is completed, Lyra spoke more softly now, your transformation will complete as well. You'll be able to take wolf form. You'll become one of us fully. Isabel nodded, digesting the information. Frightening? Yes. But she'd made her decision. And strangely, the thought of completing the transformation no longer scared her as it had before. The day before the ceremony, Isabel went into the forest. She needed to be alone, to gather her thoughts. Cain didn't object but sent 2 guards with her, just in case. She walked familiar paths, remembering those days when she came here to gather herbs. Then she'd been free, lonely, but free. Now, though. Interesting to observe the metamorphosis, came a voice, making Isabel start. Marana emerged from behind the trees. The seer was alone, her silver eyes seeming luminous in the forest shadows. Were you following me? Isabel asked. I follow fate, Marana answered mysteriously. And your fate right now is very fluid. What do you mean? Marana came closer, studying her face. When I first came, I saw a cage in you. A self-created prison of fear and stubbornness. But now, she smiled, now I see wings, still folded, but ready to unfold. I'm still afraid, Isabel admitted. Afraid of losing myself in this bond. But you won't, Marana said confidently. Do you know the difference between a cage and a home? A cage is imposed on you. A home you choose yourself. And you chose Cain not because you had no options, but because you saw a partner in him, not a master. How do you know? I see, Marana touched her shoulder, where the mark was. The bond between you is no longer one-sided. It flows both ways, balanced and harmonious. This is rare, child, even among true mates. Most bonds have a dominant and submissive side, but yours is perfect. 2 equals, 2 wholes, forming something greater. Isabel felt warmth in her chest at these words. Tomorrow everything will change, she whispered. Tomorrow everything will be completed, Marana corrected. And begin anew, a new life, a new you. But still you, just more. The seer turned to leave, but Isabel stopped her. Marana, wait. I wanted to ask, you said that breaking a true mate bond kills both. Is that true? Marana turned and her face became serious. Why do you ask? I heard Cain tell Thorn that he was willing to let me go, even if it killed him. I just want to understand. True mates are two halves of one whole, Marana explained. When the bond is established, your souls intertwine. To break it is like tearing the soul itself. The dominant partner, the one who established the mark, dies quickly. The second, more slowly, but just as inevitably. She paused. Cain knew this, and still was willing to give you freedom. He would have died, and you would have died after, but he still would have let you go, because your right to choose was more important to him than life. Isabel felt a lump rising in her throat. All these weeks she'd considered Cain selfish, a jailer. But he'd been willing to die for her freedom. I was so blind, she whispered. No, Marana said gently. You were frightened, and you had every right to be. But now you see clearly, and that's all that matters. The seer disappeared between the trees, leaving Isabel alone with a storm of emotions. That evening, returning to the caves, Isabel went straight to Cain's quarters. This time she didn't even knock, just entered. Cain stood at the table, studying some maps. He looked up at her entrance, surprise showing on his face. Isabel? Is something wrong? She crossed the room and embraced him. Simply embraced him, pressing her face to his chest, listening to his heartbeat. Cain froze for a moment, then carefully embraced her in return. What happened? He asked quietly. I spoke with Marana. Isabel raised her head, looking into his eyes. She told me what happens when a true mate bond is broken. She saw something flicker across his face.
Isabel.
You were willing to die for my freedom. Her voice trembled. You knew breaking the bond would kill you, and me after, but you were still willing to give me a choice.
Yes,
Cain said simply.
your freedom was worth it.
Idiot! Isabel struck his chest, but without force. Noble, selfless idiot.
Guilty.
He smiled weakly. Isabel stood on tiptoe and kissed him, not carefully as last time, but passionately, pouring into the kiss all her gratitude, all her admiration, all the budding feeling she was afraid to call love. Cain responded to the kiss with restrained passion, but then carefully pulled away.
Isabel, we should wait until the ceremony.
I know, she whispered, pressing her forehead to his. I just wanted you to know. I choose you, not because I must. I choose you because I want to, because you're worthy of being chosen. She saw his eyes fill with emotion, so pure and strong it took her breath away.
You can't imagine how long I've waited to hear those words.
His voice was hoarse. Tomorrow, she promised. Tomorrow, I'll say them again. Before the entire pack, before the moon. I'll accept the bond fully, without fear, without regrets.
Tomorrow,
Cain repeated, kissing her forehead.
You'll become my mate.
Not by accident, not by coercion, but by choice. And I'll spend every day showing you that you made the right choice. Isabel remained in his embrace a little longer, absorbing the warmth, strength, certainty. Tomorrow, everything would change. Tomorrow she would cease to be Isabel the healer who ran from marriage. Tomorrow she would become Isabel, the alpha's mate, a werewolf, a pack member. And for the first time, this thought didn't frighten her. It filled her with anticipation. Chapter 7, Under the Full Moon. The day of the ceremony dawned clear and warm, despite autumn having already claimed its rights. Isabel woke at dawn to gentle knocking at the door. Come in, she called, sitting up in bed. An entire procession of women entered the quarters, led by Martha and Lyra. They carried jugs of water, herbs, oils, and a snow-white dress. Time to prepare, Martha announced with a smile. The ceremony begins at sunset, but first we must conduct the purification ritual. The next several hours passed in a bustle. Isabel was bathed in water infused with lunar herbs, jasmine, white roses, lavender. Her hair was brushed and left loose, with small white flowers woven through it. Her body was rubbed with fragrant oils until her skin glowed. "You're beautiful," Lyra whispered, helping her don the ceremonial dress. The dress was simple in cut, but exquisite. White linen embroidered with silver threads forming patterns of wolves and moons. It fell in soft folds, emphasizing her figure while leaving her right shoulder bare, where the mark was. Isabel looked at her reflection in the polished metal serving as a mirror and barely recognized herself. She looked otherworldly, like a creature standing between worlds. "Cain will be speechless," one of the young women giggled. "Where is he, by the way?" Isabel asked. She hadn't seen him all day. "Undergoing his own purification ritual," Martha answered. "The Alpha must prepare as well. You'll see each other at the ceremony." When the sun began to sink toward the horizon, the women led Isabel to the ritual site. It was a large clearing in the forest, surrounded by ancient oaks. The entire pack had already gathered here, forming a wide circle. In the center of the circle burned a bonfire, and beyond it, on a rise, stood Marana in the ceremonial robes of a seer. Isabel was led to the edge of the circle. Her heart beat so loudly it seemed everyone must hear it. She surveyed the pack, dozens of faces, familiar and unfamiliar, all looking at her with anticipation and approval. Then the crowd parted on the other side, and Cain appeared. Isabel forgot how to breathe. He was dressed simply, in dark leather pants and nothing else. His torso was bare, muscles rippling in the light of the setting sun. His hair was loose, but what struck her most were his eyes, burning with amber fire, fixed only on her. He crossed the circle and they met in the center, before the fire. Marana raised her hands, calling for silence. "Pack of the Northern Wolves!" Her voice rang out, filling the clearing. "We have gathered here under the blessing of the full moon to witness the completion of a true mate bond. Cain, alpha of our pack, and Isabel, healer and chosen of his heart, stand before us and before the moon to accept the fate the stars have marked for them." Marana turned to Cain. "Cain, son of Marcus and Arya, alpha of the Northern pack. You marked this woman in fever, establishing a bond without her consent. Now, with clear mind and pure heart, you must ask her again. Does she accept you willingly?" Cain took Isabel's hands in his. His touch was warm and firm. "Isabel." His voice was quiet, but she heard every word with crystal clarity. "I marked you without permission, stole your choice. I will regret this until the end of my days. But now I give you that choice back. Will you accept me? Not as an alpha demanding submission, but as a man asking for partnership. Not as a master, but as an equal. Will you be my mate of your own free will?" Isabel felt tears fill her eyes. "I accept you." Her voice rang strong and confident. "Not because I must, but because I want to. You showed me that a bond doesn't necessarily mean a cage, that love can liberate, not confine. Yes, Cain, I will be your mate, of my own free will with an open heart." The pack erupted in joyful howls, hundreds of voices merging into a single song of celebration. Marana raised her hands again, calling for silence. "Isabel, daughter of humans, bearer of ancient magic. You stand between two worlds, human and wolf. Tonight, under the full moon, you must choose. Will you complete the transformation? Will you accept the werewolf's gift, become one of us?" Isabel turned to Marana but still held Cain's hands. "I accept," she said firmly. "I choose to complete the transformation, to become a werewolf, to become part of this pack." "Then let the moon witness your choice." Marana raised a ceremonial dagger, gleaming in the firelight. She approached Isabel and made a small cut on her mark. Then the same with Cain, a cut on his shoulder where the answering mark should be. "Blood to blood," Marana proclaimed, joining their wounds. "Soul to soul. Under the full moon, in the presence of the pack, I declare you true mates." At that moment, the full moon rose above the treetops, flooding the clearing with silvery light. And Isabel felt pain, searing, all-consuming pain, piercing every cell of her body. She cried out, falling to her knees. Cain caught her, pressing her to him. "Breathe," he whispered in her ear. "Just breathe. This is the transformation. It hurts the first time, but I'm here. I'm with you." Isabel clung to him while her body changed. She felt bones shifting, muscles restructuring, something ancient and wild awakening in her blood. Her vision became sharper, sense more intense, sounds louder. And through it all, Cain's presence. His strength flowing into her through the bond. His certainty supporting her. "Let go," he whispered. "Let go of control. Let the wolf out." Isabel did what seemed impossible. She stopped resisting. And the transformation completed. When the pain receded, Isabel found herself looking at the world from a different height. She was on 4 paws, covered in silver-red fur. Beside her stood an enormous black wolf with amber eyes, Cain. The pack exploded with howls, greeting, acknowledgement. Isabel raised her muzzle to the moon and howled with them. It was liberating, wild, right. Cain nuzzled her neck, and even in wolf form she felt the tenderness of the gesture. "Run with me." His voice sounded in her head through the bond, and that was a miracle in itself. And they ran. Through the forest, under the moon, 2 halves of a single whole. Isabel felt more alive than ever, wind in her fur, earth under her paws, Cain's presence beside her. It was intoxicating. They ran until they reached a secluded clearing deep in the forest. Here Cain stopped, and they both transformed back into human form. They looked at each other. The ceremony was complete, the pack had left them, but the most important part was still ahead. "Isabel," Cain stepped toward her, his eyes burning. "Are you sure? We can wait." "No," she shook her head, approaching him. "No more waiting. I chose you. I want you, now." Their lips met in a kiss, and this time there was no restraint. Only passion, need, love that she was no longer afraid to acknowledge. Cain lowered her onto the soft grass, and under the light of the full moon, they completed the bond. Tenderly, passionately, completely. And when their bodies joined, Isabel felt the last barrier between them crumble. The bond blazed bright, filling every cell of her being with warmth, love, a sense of absolute completion. She hadn't lost herself in this bond, she'd found herself. Found a part of herself she hadn't even known existed. Afterward, lying in Cain's embrace, listening to his heartbeat, Isabel smiled. "I love you," she whispered for the first time. Cain held her tighter. "I've loved you from the moment my wolf recognized you. Even when you hated me, even when you were afraid, I loved you and waited for you to be ready to love me back. I'm sorry I made you wait so long. You were worth every second of waiting." He kissed the top of her head. "And all those still to come." They lay under the moon, 2 souls finally become one, and for the first time since that fateful bite, Isabel felt truly free. The paradox was that she'd found freedom not in solitude, but in connection. Not in fleeing, but in accepting. Love, it turned out, wasn't a cage. Love was wings. Chapter 8. A New Life. 3 months had passed since the full moon ceremony, and Isabel's life had changed so much that sometimes she barely recognized herself, but in a good way. The morning began like many others recently, with Cain kissing her shoulder, slowly waking her from sleep. "Good morning, my mate," he whispered, and Isabel smiled without opening her eyes. "Too early," she mumbled, burying her face in his chest. "The sun is already up," Cain laughed, "and the pack is waiting for us at the morning council." Isabel groaned but sat up. Being the alpha's mate meant new responsibilities, and she was gradually getting used to them. Pack council, resolving disputes, caring for the needs of pack members, all this was now part of her life. But she also hadn't abandoned her role as healer. On the contrary, now she could help not only pregnant she-wolves but the entire pack. Her knowledge of herbs, combined with werewolf endurance, made her invaluable. 5 more minutes. She pulled Cain back into bed. He yielded readily, embracing her. At the council, they raised the question that the sister of the Southern Pack's alpha had fallen ill. Someone suggested that this was a convenient moment to conquer their territories. But Cain immediately dismissed the idea, as he had no intention of seizing territories like that. But Garrett, the alpha of the southern pack, was begging to save his pregnant sister. And the counselors decided that if Isabel succeeded, it would strengthen the friendly alliance between their packs for years to come. "Could you examine her?" one of the counselors asked. Isabel looked at Cain, who gave an almost imperceptible nod. The decision was hers. "I'll help," she said. "But I go as a healer, not as part of political games." "Agreed." Garrett nodded with respect. "Thank you, Isabel." 2 days later, Isabel set out for the southern pack. Cain insisted that Thorn and Lyra accompany her for protection. The farewell was difficult. "I'll miss you," Isabel admitted, embracing Cain. "I'll feel your absence in every cell." He held her tighter. "The bond will work even at a distance. If anything happens, call me and I'll come." "I know," she kissed him. "I'll return in a week, at most." The journey to the southern pack took 2 days. Their territory was more mountainous, the caves deeper and colder. But the pack welcomed them warmly, especially when they learned Isabel had come to help the alpha's sister. The young woman was named Mira, and she was in her 7th month of pregnancy. Isabel immediately saw the problem. The baby was positioned incorrectly, and if not corrected, the birth could kill both mother and cub. "This can be fixed," Isabel reassured the frightened Mira. "But it will be painful and will take time." For the next 3 days, Isabel worked tirelessly. She used massage, herbal compresses, even ancient techniques her grandmother had taught her. Slowly, carefully, she turned the baby into the correct position. On the 4th day, the baby finally took the right position. Mira cried with relief, embracing Isabel. "You saved my child," she sobbed. "Saved us both. How can I thank you?" "Just give birth to a healthy cub," Isabel smiled. "That will be the best thanks." That night, Garrett held a feast in her honor. At the table, surrounded by members of the southern pack, Isabel felt something strange. Belonging. Not only to the northern pack, but to werewolves in general. "You're special," Garrett said, raising his cup. "Born human, became a werewolf, but remained a healer. You're a bridge between worlds. And if all alpha females are like you, our people will prosper." "To Isabel!" the pack shouted, and she felt warmth in her chest. Through the bond, she sent Cain a wave of love and longing. His response came immediately. The same love, the same longing, and a promise. Home soon. When Isabel returned to the northern pack, Cain met her at the entrance to the caves. He swept her into his arms, lifted and spun her, ignoring the laughing pack around them.
I missed you so much it should be illegal.
He murmured into her hair. "It was only a week," Isabel laughed.
The longest week of my life.
He set her down, but didn't let go.
How did it go?
"Well, Mira and the baby will be fine." Isabel paused. "Cain, Garrett is serious about the alliance. The threat of hunters is real. We need to act."
I know.
He nodded.
While you were gone, I called a council. We'll send envoys to other packs, try to create a united council.
"That's good." Isabel leaned against him. "We're stronger together."
Like you and me.
He leaned down and kissed her, softly and tenderly.
Let's go home. I have a whole week of lost time to make up for.
Isabel laughed and let him lead her to their quarters. Another month later, something happened that Isabel hadn't expected. She woke with nausea and immediately knew. Her healer's instincts couldn't be wrong. She was pregnant. The news shocked her. She, who had been so afraid of losing her freedom, now carried a child beneath her heart. Cain's child. The pack's heir. When she told him, Cain froze, his face running through a dozen emotions in a second. Shock, joy, fear, delight. "A child," he whispered, dropping to his knees and pressing his forehead to her still flat belly. "We're going to be parents." "Are you happy?" Isabel asked uncertainly. Cain looked up and she saw tears in his eyes. "Happy," Isabel, I have no words. You give me everything. Yourself, your love, now a child. How can I not be the happiest man in the world? Isabel cried too, and they held each other, laughing and crying at the same time. News of Isabel's pregnancy spread through the pack instantly, and celebrations continued for 3 days. It was a blessing, a sign of the pack's strength and prosperity. Another 6 months passed. Isabel's belly had rounded, and she was in the final weeks of pregnancy. Despite the discomfort, she continued working as a healer, though Cain constantly worried. You need to rest, he insisted once again when he found her in the library studying records about childbirth. I am resting, Isabel objected, just sitting and reading. Isabel. Cain, I'm a healer, she looked at him seriously. I must be prepared. Giving birth to a half-werewolf is complicated. I need to know everything possible. He sighed and sat beside her, embracing her. I'm just afraid of losing you. You won't. She took his hand and placed it on her belly, where their child was actively kicking. We're both strong. You, me, and this little warrior inside me. We'll manage. And they did. When the time came, the labor was long and difficult, but Isabel went through it with a warrior's courage. Cain didn't leave her side for a second, holding her hand, whispering words of support, and when their daughter, tiny, with a tuft of red hair and amber eyes, let out her first cry, Isabel felt her heart expanding, containing love she hadn't even known existed. She's beautiful, Cain whispered, holding his daughter with reverence. Like her mother. Eliana, Isabel said. We'll name her Eliana. It means gift of the moon. Eliana, Cain repeated, kissing his daughter's forehead. Welcome to the world, little one. Epilogue. 5 years had passed. Isabel stood at the edge of the clearing, watching as Eliana, no longer a baby but a lively, curious 5-year-old girl, ran with the other pack cubs. Their daughter had inherited her mother's red hair and her father's amber eyes, and her character matched, brave, smart, cheerful. Beside Isabel stood Cain, his hand resting on her belly. She was pregnant again, this time with twins. Think we can handle 3? She asked with a smile. We've handled everything else, Cain kissed her temple. We'll handle this too. Much had changed in these 5 years. The United Council of Packs had been created, and the Silver Hunters had been driven from their territories. Peace between the packs held, largely thanks to Isabel's efforts, as she traveled between packs as both healer and mediator. Her old house in the village had now been converted into an infirmary, where several times a month she received all who needed help, both humans and werewolves. She had become a legend, the healer who could walk in both worlds. But every evening she returned here, to the caves of the northern pack. Home. To Cain. To Eliana. To the family she had created. Mama! Eliana shouted, running up to them. Look what I found! She held out a tiny white flower, the same kind that had been woven into Isabel's hair at the full moon ceremony. It's beautiful, Sunshine. Isabel crouched down, accepting the flower. Like you, Eliana said seriously. Papa says you're the most beautiful in the world. Papa's right, Cain confirmed, scooping his daughter into his arms. She squealed with delight. Isabel watched them, her husband and daughter, the pack around them, the forest that had become her home. 5 years ago, she'd believed that freedom meant solitude, that love was a cage. How wrong she had been. True freedom was here, in the right to choose her own path, in the strength to love without fear, in the courage to accept the life fate offered and make it her own. She had started by running from marriage. She had ended by finding love that surpassed all her dreams. Fate, it turned out, knew best. Thank you for staying with me throughout this story. If you enjoyed the tale, please share your thoughts in the comments. I'm really interested to hear your opinions and learn about your favorite moments. Discuss the plot, ask questions, and share your ideas for future stories. Your support, comments, likes, and subscriptions are incredibly important for the channel's growth and inspire me to keep writing. Let's create a cozy book-loving space together, where everyone can find something special. Thank you for listening, and see you soon in the next stories.